Hey guys, welcome to the Blueprint for Men podcast. And today, Mike and I are going to be taking a look back and then also assessing where things are at in the ministry and looking forward. So, hold on, we're going to be taking a deep dive. It's really important because, well, it's hard to believe, but this ministry started in 2014, which is coming up on 10 years ago. The first actual board meeting was January of 2015. So we're going to have kind of a little bit of celebration about that at that time. But we're just anticipating and looking forward. One thing that I'm just going to preface this. I think most men can relate to this. We're like an earthworm. We can get stretched out. And as we get stretched out, we can't go any further till we stop and pull it together. And so I think this is reflected in a business, in ministries. We all get stretched out, things get disorderly, and we have to refocus. And so, right now, over the last probably month, I've been doing a lot of refocusing, and in our leadership team, we've been discussing how we can do better. There's always that quest for doing better. The vision that we have has grown larger over time, and so the fence, the goalpost keeps getting moved back to what is success. So we prayerfully covet your prayers that we will be uplifted by the Holy Spirit and power. So anyway, Mike's going to be doing some kind of an interview here, and I'm going to be also probably throwing a few questions his way because he's getting more embedded with the ministry, and I really appreciate him taking the time here from Colorado. So, Mike, take it away.
Glad to be here. So, yes, I'm relatively new to the ministry, just over 2 years ago. And when I found out about Blueprint for Men myself, I thought this makes great sense to have a great ministry. I was introduced not to the ministry, though. First, I was introduced to you, Marty, first
Yeah.
through our mutual friend, Mickey. And I learned about who you were and Blueprint for Men. And so my first experience, as I've mentioned in other episodes, was going to that spring retreat that year. So I got to learn more about what the ministry was about, and I've heard more about your stories. We spent a lot of time together that first weekend, plus when we were down in the Grand Canyon.
Yep.
So I know you've told this to me, but I wonder how can you share what were the origins of wanting to do men's ministry, and how did it get started?
Yeah, well, I won't take too much time, but after 30 years in education, I felt God was calling me to do something different. I think that all of us, because of family, raising families, we understandably keep the hand to the plow and play a conservative game in income generation and making sure we provide for our children as they move out of the house. Certain opportunities come along that you can actually take advantage of. And so my wife and I, when I was at that 30-year mark, I was 55, I just really felt God was pulling me this direction. And so as we prayed about it, it was very clear that we were to take this act of faith and begin this faith journey. But I've shared this on other podcasts, but in 1994, which is another interesting thing, that's 30 years ago, it's hard to believe. We had sold everything we owned, and we lived in California at that time, and we dropped out of the rat race for a couple of years. And that was kind of a point of reference for us to know that, when you go on a faith journey, you really don't need much. And that's a real, I'm just making a challenge to each one of you guys out there that might be listening to this, is that sometimes you can feel trapped. You don't know what direction to go because of stuff. You don't need as much as you think you do, and you can live simply, and you can take steps in your life to free you up. So that's kind of what we did, and God has provided every step of the way. At first, I was wanting to go through the actual organized church, but it was clear that God wanted me to form a nonprofit. So I had to come up with a name, and the name I felt really clearly that God gave was Blueprint for Men, because what I liked about that name that really resonated with me is Number one, Jesus is the blueprint. He is the model. That's the first thing to understand. And then the second thing is it's saying follow him. He is the blueprint, but you need to develop your own specialized plan. So all along, that's kind of been my challenge to men. Get to know Jesus, know him. He's the pattern for our lives. He's the Lord and Savior of our life. But then also, what is your plan for life? And to actually take some time to craft that prayerfully and doing some study. So that's kind of how things started, and had to form a board of directors like any nonprofit. You got to manage, some kind of a budget. Donations are up and down. It's a moving target. It's very difficult. Anybody that's ever thought about doing a nonprofit, it's an intimidating thing. You definitely have to say, God, you're wanting me to do this. I know you're going to provide. And that's been the case. So that's really the background of it. A lot more I could say, but it's been a great journey, and getting to know guys like you has been just probably one of the best parts of it.
So one quick question about the beginnings, at least. What was, if you think back 10 years or so, what was probably the biggest challenge that you were facing?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was really the unknown. There's a beauty in the unknown. It's like when you have children, when you have children, you don't really know what you're getting into, and that's the beauty of it. It's also the challenge of it. You haven't done it before. So to me, just kind of like figuring out as I went was the challenge. I think also working with the church and not being part of the organization was a new piece for me. I had always been in an educational setting, so part of the machine that you had, all the different pieces, so I could teach. I could do what I was specialized and equipped to do. Ministry, the downside of a small ministry, I'll just be honest, is that you feel like you're building a ship, a small little boat, to serve the people in the big boat. And so there's a lot of redundancy that it's unfortunate because, you have to have somebody take care of your finances. You have to have somebody take care of the legal things. You have to have somebody take care of, the technical stuff. And so it just really starts eating away at a lot of your sweet spot that you're really gifted for. So I would say that at the front end and still all the way through has been probably one of the biggest challenges, is feeling just spread thin because you've got to wear so many hats.
Did you figure out ways to prioritize anything and put things first, knowing that something else will be taken care of, or just leaving it in God's hands?
Yeah, that's been a struggle. I think that's been a struggle in my life all along. I think I've got a little bit of, if I were to actually be diagnosed, I think I'd have a little bit of ADD tendencies. Being distracted, wanting to do a lot of different things. Case in point, Mike, you and I were talking about how tomorrow morning I'm going to be flying out to Bozeman, Montana to go climb the highest point in Montana. Hopefully we'll do well. I am getting older, and the mountains seem to grow on me, literally getting bigger. But those are the kind of things I hate to miss out on, but it puts on a squeeze on my time. So a long answer for a short question is it was a challenge then, it's a challenge now. And again, I think that in a perfect world, my sweet spot, everybody kind of knows what they're best suited for. I would be writing, I would be creating content, and I would be doing small groups. Managing a ministry, running big events, even though I'm good at it, or pretty good at it. Those just take a lot of bandwidth that I think pull me away from the things that only I could do. So trying to make some of these adjustments, and that's part of this little conversation here.
Yeah. Okay, so this is more of a heady question that will lead us out of this category, though. But
yeah,
your 65-year-old self, what would you tell your 55-year-old self who's just getting started? Do you have any words for that, words of wisdom for that 10-year younger guy?
That's a painful question because, hindsight's always 20/20, right?
Yep.
And yet I don't know. I think that one thing I've heard all along, Mike, is I've felt this reassurance from God is you didn't go to school to know how to do what I'm calling you to do. Just like the disciples, they weren't schooled. They had to learn as they went. I think of the disciples and the apostles. They were trying to figure their way for quite some time as the early church was developing. I think anybody in ministry, it's the same way. It's hard for me to lead others if I haven't done a lot of the stuff that I really didn't feel suited for. It's been a learning 10 years. Now, I believe right now there is a shift going on that's going to, and I've been sensing that and been working that way for the last year as I've been writing more as like email and, creating content. But I need to shift more and more that direction. So if I could go back, I would tell the younger version of myself, I would say, just start writing that book right away. Just chisel away at it and just eat the elephant bite, bite, bite. That's what I would do.
Make a plan, go for it. So,
Yep.
okay, last part to this category is so this kind of informs where we're going to go for the rest of our time too. But what does it look like for the future then? If like, actually, let me back up. I thought of another question real quick.
Yep.
Did you ever ask yourself why another men's ministry? There are a number of good men's ministries out there. And so what prompted you to say, I need to work in a men's ministry or create a men's ministry for solving which problem?
Yeah, I think that really at the heart of it is okay, so let me back up. God ordained that the church would be the vehicle for spreading the gospel.
Right.
So really, I felt like there needed to be a church connection to this ministry. The church that I have belonged to all my life is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm very strongly committed to what it stands for. I know that it's run by people and there's problems. And I know that with time, all institutions can drift and have issues and kind of lose that vision. But nevertheless, these are my brothers. You're my brother. A lot of people in this church, and so I felt strongly that the mission of this ministry was to serve the men in this subculture, because there are unique characteristics about men in the Seventh-day Adventist Church that don't exist elsewhere, at least not predominantly. But yet I see the universal need of every man. So I've never wanted to be exclusive by any means, but I think that you have to have a target audience, which is Seventh-day Adventist Christian men of all ages, but particularly are men that are younger and into the child-raising years. So again, a fairly long answer to that question, but it's a super important question. I appreciate you asking that.
Yeah. I've been in the church for a little over 30 years, and I've never had the experience of being part of anything organized with men's ministry, unless I organized it myself, which was just
Right.
bits and pieces over the years.
Right.
And so your ministry, Blueprint for Men, is the first any in-depth involvement I've had in a men's ministry within the church.
Yeah.
And the more I've looked at over the last number of months, and we'll kind of move into the next category too, which is communications, because I took a look at, I was asked to take a look at it by Tom, our friend, and he said, why don't you work on building a job description when it comes to communications? Just at your ideal position. Well, he didn't even say communications. I prayed about it and I wrote it up, and it was communications. And as I looked more at it, I thought there's a lot of opportunity for Blueprint to have just more and better communication. So in our next kind of category here, it says, you said you didn't have any real formal communications until 2021. What's the story behind that?
Well, as you can tell, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I was intimidated by the thought of doing that because I, in my heart, knew that this would become the main thing. And
You
even
mean
though it's very,
communications, like it
yeah,
would take over your
yeah,
time? Okay.
yes. And really, on the front end of this ministry, really what was consuming my time was running small groups uh, at churches, coffee shops, you name it, homes. So I was running like 6 groups a week, literally. Young men, particularly, I have a lot of old young students still in the area, former students in their 20s and 30s, even into their 40s. And I felt that was a real gift that I had been given to have that deep level of relationship, and I hated to squander that. So that ate up a lot of my time. I mean, imagine being up at 5 in the morning to have a group at 6 in the morning, 4 days out of 7, and then the other days I would have at least like one other group. So it was a learning time and relationship building time, and I really miss that, honestly. I have felt with managing a ministry, doing the communication, I find myself more distant from where I think my real sweet spot is. So that's why I need help in the communication. The other part of it was event planning. We were doing more events than we're doing now, and even bigger events. But because of the time consumption and the financial expenses, we have kind of dialed that back. So I'd love to do it all, and I have done it all, but it's not reasonable to grow a ministry without having a good communication platform.
So what's been the communication, the main form of it up till now?
Well, Grant Graves, and I think a lot of people listening to this would have listened to Grant's podcast. He's very gifted, and it was a real loss when he decided to go back to teaching full time, which I understand. He's raising a young family. We weren't able to pay the kind of income that he would need, and benefits as well. So that platform has kind of been limping along, and you're helping me with that right now, trying to take our messages that are both in YouTube to be on the podcast audio platform. So that was really how things started, and then the email started coupling with that, and that was really nice because it was kind of a turnkey thing. Grant, go do this. So since he has exited, it's just, I hated for it to go away. And so it was like the Lord just told me, it's your turn. You do it, even though it's a real big task. This is for you right now.
Well, we'll work on it together. At least, as we've talked about it for the podcast, I'd love to be able to say, we're going to have this format. I'm kind of interviewing Marty, and you're going to get the mind, the mission of Blueprint for Men, and the mind of Marty. I'm going to keep saying that.
Well, scary place.
Well, we want to be able to share what you got, Marty, because
Yeah.
no one's getting any younger, and so all this stuff needs to kind of be out there for people.
That's true.
If it's not going to be a book, it's going to be a podcast.
Yeah.
So, what do you have any thoughts on the future for communications? I mean, I can't imagine you want to make it any more complex.
Yeah, no, I think that really what I appreciate for some of you that have thought about doing a podcast or wondering how this all works, Mike, in fact, why don't you tell us a little bit about, and I know where this is kind of a free form interview. It could go
Right.
long, but it's maybe just as much for our benefit as anybody's. But let me just ask you, how do you take a recording like this and make it something that's easy to access?
Well, I've got some experience with podcasts myself. I've produced and recorded a number of podcasts in my past. And when I thought about what could be done for communications for Blueprint, I thought a really good podcast is a wonderful vehicle to bring content and scheduling of events. And so being able to keep this as an audio podcast, that was my burden. I love audio podcasts because I love audiobooks and anything audio because I can be doing multiple things at once while I'm listening to something that's good. And so that was the big thing, is I wanted to make sure that the audio part of what you guys have, what Blueprint has, keeps going.
Yeah.
And so just using a couple of really good tools between, Riverside and Buzzsprout is the platform that we're using. They're easy to use, and I've used them in the past, and I want to keep this going so that the content can keep on coming out with minimal, friction in between, where it's not hard to do. So my goal with communications would be, I want to make this as easy for you, Marty, to get what you need to say, whether we think up, if we've already talked about it, but we haven't really set into motion any plans for particular, topics or series. It seems like this retreat is taking up a lot of our time and planning. But after that, we're going to be, I think, looking into more, and I think we're going to have an episode where we're going to preview some of what's coming in terms of what we'd like to say, how we'd like to say it. And so with the tools that we have available to us, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to get a decent quality podcast of some good content. And we can even, I'm thinking out loud here too, we could potentially make a different format, smaller podcast, not unlike what Grant was doing, another branch to the podcast, because there are guys that do this. I'm thinking of a guy named Ryan Mickley. You know who Ryan is.
Yep.
He does 2 or 3 a week, but they're different formats. He does an interview, then he does a short form where he's just talking off the top of his head with some talking points. So we could do something like that. Again, just thinking out loud. But and so my burden would be, I want people to know what Marty has on his mind, and how can we get that out to the most people, whether it's our mailing list or any podcast listener. For anybody listening to this podcast, it's so appreciated. We can't tell you enough how much we appreciate that you listen to this. So we hope that you can share it with others, especially because you're going to get the mind of Marty some more. So that's what communication is. My mission is to take the mission of Blueprint and the mind of Marty to put it out there. That would be the goal.
Well, Mike, I'll just segue into other people's minds here, but I think that interviewing other individuals like we've done over the last several months has been really good, and I want to do more of that. So, I think that that kind of a menu of some variety, something short, something, more long form, like an interview. Not every, is, you have a little bit of a selection, what's going to fit in your time frame and in your interest. So, but we want it to be something that you actually start feeling like you're building a little bit of a relationship with people at a distance. I mean, you might know me, but nevertheless, we want it to be worth your time. That's for sure. There's so many things to choose from out there, and we don't claim to be the best, but we want to get better all the time. So,
no reason not to be. You've got you've got not just experience to draw from, but so many connections with people, good people who can have so much to share. And I want to make sure we can capture some of that. So, speaking of resources in the mind of Marty, can you just tell us, what is available for anybody who might be just listening to this but haven't been to the website, for instance? What's available through Blueprint for Men as resources?
Yeah, well, let me just finish up with communication. And with the communication, what I'd like to say is, we've got a weekly email, semi-weekly right now. I've been dropping the ball on a number of occasions, but somewhat unapologetically, I've tried to keep my priorities right. This isn't my only job. Like I was telling Mike right before we got on this, I said, today, in addition to ministry work, I was trying to deal with a broken garage door. We've got a house that's aging and some of the windows need to be replaced or still under warranty. So we're trying to figure that out. And all I can say is, guys, most every one of you understands. You've got stuff that's going on in your life. And so back to the communication. We've got the weekly email. We've got the podcast, YouTube. And then also there's, some opportunities we have for even text messaging, which I think might be a good way to reach out to guys periodically.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people spend how much time a day on their phones, and how much of that is, reading texts? And well, I have a real bright idea. We need to create a Blueprint for Men game, so then they don't just have texting, it's game. You can gamify Blueprint for Men.
Gamification.
That's right.
All right, now you're really stressing me out. Okay.
That's right. Now we don't add. Okay, back to the other question. So
the resources.
You have anything else with communications?
I don't think so. There's always more we could talk about, but let's move on.
Always is.
Yeah.
So resources. So what do you have to offer guys who come to the website, or if they want to subscribe anywhere? What can you share with them.
Yeah. Well, I think that we we have very limited that we have published, honestly. Behind me, sometimes you might see, we've got, I took it down actually, but it's
Oh, the
the
summit,
book,
morning summit.
Morning Summit. I kind of co-wrote that with Grant. I kind of directed him on that, and he had the bandwidth to do it, and I really appreciate it. So that's a small group experience, and I really have this whole discipleship thing. A big part, the word disciple is discipline, and if we don't have the disciplines, we don't get too far. We all struggle with it. Some people are naturally more disciplined than others. But in fact, this retreat coming up about freedom, there's a quote some guy was saying, I think it was like Jocko Willink, somebody like that knows quite a bit about discipline, being a Navy SEAL. But it was like, if you don't have self-discipline, you don't have freedom.
Yeah, he's got his newest book. It's sitting downstairs in my bedroom. Discipline equals freedom.
Yeah. Oh, great. Cool. So you get the idea that discipline is an essential part of discipleship, and so that's why we chose to write that book. I'd like to even recraft it. There's some things that need to be tweaked on it. It would be its third edition. But nevertheless, it's an effort by this ministry to make a very useful workbook to help guys get a group together, 3, 4, 5 guys, and do this quarterly habit building experience. And it's been a real blessing to a lot of people. I even know that there's been one guy that actually was baptized in part because of the journey with that band of brothers going through that book. So that to me is just heartwarming to know those kind of things. But a book doesn't do anything on its own. I find that when a book finds an application in a small group, it gets a lot more traction.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, I want to write more books of that nature that are very practical.
Nice. Well, we're going to make sure that the link to Morning Summit will be in our show notes as well.
Nice. Yeah. The other kind of things that I have a really burden for are just really simple, linkable ebooks. Don't cost anything. Somebody just download it. Because I would rather make no money and disseminate good information than make money and hardly get any to get out there. Overall, I just really want guys to have tools in their tool belt that they can get moving forward. So
what are
those
some
are the kind of,
examples?
what's that?
What are some examples?
Yeah, back at the beginning of the year, I was really having a lot of guys reach out to me just saying, hey, do you have anything really simple for getting a men's ministry started? And a lot of the stuff that was out there was kind of big, courses or a bigger book. And so I just put together this ebook. It's the 7 steps for launching your men's ministry. And really, it's really about building the foundation. So if you want to start with building a good foundation, download that. It's got clickable links. It goes to downloadable documents and so on. You go through that, and then you're really ready to get started. I think too often guys think, I want to get started, and let's just start without a plan. And I think that's a mistake, because most men's ministry efforts fail. And the reason is that leader is not educated and equipped to get started, really.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my big burdens.
Well, guess where that link's going to be in our show notes. We're going to
There
have
you
a
go.
direct link for that for
Thank
people
you.
to download as well. And I'll add to that, Marty, as of this week, I'm going to be talking to somebody in my local church for the first time about starting men's ministry, or at least doing something more than what's happening. And so I might be a great case study on how to start a men's ministry.
Yep.
Even if I've got some leadership experience, I don't have true leadership experience in terms of running a men's ministry within my local congregation. I've got group experience and experience with you, but it'll be fun to put some of this and implement some of this this work. And I will say another resource you have that I experienced this last week was the quarterly leadership Zoom call.
Yep.
That was great. I really did enjoy that. All I did was listen. I was out for a walk. All I did was listen the whole time. But I enjoyed it a lot. It was great hearing just the different perspectives from guys. And I just know that when the time comes, and I'm however many months into my process, it's going to be great to have other men to talk to on a regular basis who are going through this process. So if you're leading a men's ministry now or want to, get the resource, but then also know that Marty leads this quarterly men's ministry leadership Zoom call, and it's an hour and a half, and it's just a great going through just what's going well or what can we learn from each other, praying for each other, of course. So I think that's another great resource that you've got out there as well.
Yeah, and we'll get to that part, the leadership stage of this interview. But let me go back to
Yep.
the 7 steps thing. The third step to me is the most profound. If you, as a man in your church, said, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do, download that document, read it over. But particularly step 3 is about praying for your men. You get a roster of guys in your church the best you can, get their names, phone numbers, emails. It may take you some time, but nevertheless, get that going. Try to find out as much as you can about the men in your church. Some you already know, some you don't. But your whole thing is to actually form a little bit of a prayer team, and it starts with you. So start praying for each man by name. Now, if you have a church that's massive, it might be kind of hard to do, but most people are in small churches. And so pray for each man as you get to know them. And then even better yet is to reach out to these men and, give them a call, text them, whatever, wouldn't be a good time to call, actually meet up with them maybe, but to pray with that man. It's rare. I'm telling you, I talk to a lot of guys and I ask, when was the last time that happened? And most guys go, never. So it's ripe opportunity. I'm telling you, you establish those kind of deep relationships that are intimate spaces with God and this other man. It will bond you to the heart of these men, and they will want to come to what you invite them to. So start small. That's really the key. Is, just get to know guys and really invest in them.
Yeah, and I know one thing that I've learned to do as I've worked with guys who are hopefully, going to get out of a pornography habit. As I've interacted with guys, I've done some of my own, advertising for my own brand. As I talk with these guys on Facebook Messenger or whatever it might be, I've prayed, God, help me to love these men, because sometimes they're a little off,
Yeah.
and just their questions or whatever it might be. And I just like, God, please help me to love these guys. I don't
Right.
know them that well, and I'm starting to get to know them, some of them, And
Yeah.
so that's another, I guess, a counsel would be just ask God to show you how to love these guys who may not always be the most lovable people. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody is, but
Right.
not everybody's easy to get along with. And if you're going to do anything like this in a congregation, you're going to run into that. I'm sure you have, Marty.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, God, how do I love these men in a way that means something to them so
Yeah.
that we can have a meaningful men's ministry that makes a difference?
Yeah, I was having a conversation yesterday with a young man that I have spent some time with over the last year, and he's former military, got into a bit of a drinking habit, and it's just it's tough. I've never had been an alcoholic, but it's an addiction it's a comfort. Let's face it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's gone through a lot of tough stuff, some PTSD type stuff, and when you find that something that's very predictable at giving you comfort, making you feel good, you're going to go there.
Yep.
So, we're trying to help guys that are in addiction. It's kind of interesting where I'm sitting in my office. I'm looking out through my glass door here, and I've got a fawn walking by with spots on it. And maybe some of you guys can hear, maybe every once in a while, an airplane taking off. I'm right next to a little municipal airport, Collegedale Municipal Airport. And it's a really cool spot. I really enjoy it. This was an old warehouse. Didn't really talk about this on the front end, about the background with the ministry. But really, this ministry started out, just on my kitchen table, dining room table. Eventually built an office in my basement in a big storage room. Then after that, there's an old warehouse that we've rehabbed not too far away. And So we've got a meeting room right next door, got my office here, got a kind of a fire pit out here to my right, where we have gatherings on Friday night called The Forge, which make a plug for that movie. If you haven't seen The Forge, you got to go. That's got to be the most powerful movie. I think it's up there near the top. Very good. You got to watch it. But then also we have a workshop space here. So that's kind of my environment right here that I spend time. I haven't been here too much lately because we have had the air conditioning go out. And if you have a place without air conditioning in Tennessee, it gets a little bit nasty.
The smells.
Yeah, it gets a little funky.
Anything else on resources you'd like to bring up? Mention?
I think that's probably it for now. I would
Okay.
like to put a link in there for maybe another resource,
Okay.
because
I
this
gotta start
speaks to
taking my notes.
what you were talking about, Mike, is give me the heart to love these men, that are in need. And what I just want to say as a segue to that is, men's ministry. Many times I've had people come to me, yeah, that guy really needs men's ministry. In other words, he's really messed up. And the truth is, every man needs to grow in Christ.
Yes.
And so every man should humbly acknowledge, I need help, and I am vulnerable alone. All you got to do is read through the Bible. And so why I'm so passionate about men's ministry is it works. I've seen it work. And I know we see all the time in the news, the media, these high-level pastors having falls, sexual infidelity, you name it. I believe most of them did not have friends that were really knowing what was going on in their life, that had the authority to speak to them
Yeah.
and to challenge them. So, but anyway, there's a study that was done in 2011 by George Barna. Most people listening to this probably heard of Barna surveys. Anyway, it was 2011. It's called the 10 Stops of Spiritual Maturity. And so they do the survey of general population, and it goes through all these different levels of spiritual engagement. The last 1% of that survey, the results, 1% of the population gets into two categories. One category is they have a profound love for God, but the last 0.5%, those that get to the 99.5% and above, that last 0.5%, it's actually they have a profound love of people. That's the hardest thing, Mike. You can develop a strong love for God, but the growing edge is our love for people because they're not very lovely.
Yeah. No, sometimes they're not, but it's, I don't know that it comes naturally to us humans.
No,
That's why
no,
it's a prayer, because
right,
it's a divine origin of that
right,
love for the unlovable.
right.
And there are people out there who have caring, loving hearts, obviously.
Yeah,
But I find for me, it's like I genuinely need to be caring for people who may not seem to be lovable or come across as lovable, if you will.
right,
And so I've had to learn that personally. And I'm continuing to have to learn it, in this other space that I find myself in around men and addiction ministry here locally. Just interacting with guys who make mistakes and fail, and
right.
learning to offer up that grace. And I'm not directly involved in the ministry, but I know
Yep,
it needs to be there. And
yep,
if guys like you just mentioned who have the addiction problem are going to something that almost works. That's why addiction continually grabs a hold on us, because it almost works, never does quite fully.
right.
And only God is the one who always does it. So
Yep,
just for clarification, show notes are going to contain what? A link to the study?
yep, yep.
Okay.
I'll get you that link, Mike. But it's
Okay.
powerful. I think it's one of those points of reference for anybody that has any spiritual leanings should be aware of, because it really gives a snapshot of where people are at.
Nice. Yeah,
Yep,
I'll make sure to get that's gets included.
yep,
Okay. Well, I know another big resource you have is, we didn't mention it until just now. We mentioned it a couple of times, I guess, but is events. And so you did say, and I guess I was kind of surprised to hear, you used to have more and bigger events. And I mean, I'm just like this morning in our staff meeting, we were talking about having nearly 120 people at the retreat that's coming up here next week. And I'm thinking that's a lot of guys. You've had bigger events than that.
Yeah, we had in the early stages, we had, I spent more time focusing and promoting events. Promotion is really huge, as
Yeah.
you know.
Yep.
And so when we were really launching, I had a big event, and it was more of a 3-hour event, 3 or 4 hour event on a Saturday afternoon at a large church. And this iron sharpened iron idea that most men kind of gravitate to, this very masculine image that we need to come together to be sharper. I did a play on words on that, and we did it several years, and it was called Chainsaws and Butter Knives.
Nice.
And so that event was something that was set up in a way that we had, an engagement inside, meeting, music, that kind of thing, even some breakout stuff. But then afterwards, we had a light meal, and then we set up a kind of a lumberjack contest. It took a lot of work. That's all I can tell you. Put all the I had wood cut up into rounds, regular segments of log, and put it up on this terrace. We had 3 teams. We had cross-cut saws. This was all hand. We didn't use any chainsaws. And so the idea was, how many rounds could you cut off the the log that was in a yoke kind of a thing? How many rounds we could cut off I think it was 10 minutes, and how many logs could be split. And we had these steel fence posts, and all we had to do was take the wood and you stack it up, and it was like a bar graph. So this team, all the wood that they split, they stacked it up, and it became this bar graph. And then over here, the next team might not have had as much. So you could just see very pictorially who won. And these guys are wailing. I mean, wood is flying. It was intense. But I'd love to do it again. But I have to have people.
That sounds like a manpower heavy, day. You need a lot of help with something like that.
It took weeks to get it set up.
Yeah.
Which, is good stuff. I enjoy that kind of thing. But, yeah. So,
well, events, though, that's another piece, like another prong to the ministry. You have events, live events.
Yeah.
And again, I'm hoping and praying by next year I'll have something going on here in Colorado. We can have a live event.
Yeah.
And have this really cool featured speaker by Marty, name of Marty here. But tell me about what's been, so that's one event. That sounds like an amazing, it's like a single afternoon event. You've got
Right.
weekend long retreats you've done, I'm sure.
Yep. And then these events that I would call, very specialized events, like going on a trip to the Grand Canyon,
yes.
our
Yep.
ministry leadership expedition, things like that. So the events, really, anything can be an event. It's just an opportunity for guys to get together.
Yep.
You could have a men's breakfast. That's an event. It can be simple or it can be complicated, as you want it to be.
So that reminds me. So if I remember right, in the 7 steps to building a men's ministry, you kind of build a calendar of
Right.
a series of events to happen throughout the year. Men's breakfast is in January,
Yep.
and then something around Father's Day, and then a
Yep.
fall retreat or
Yep.
event for a weekend long something or other.
Right. If you just had those, focal points, I think it would be better than nothing. Aim low, I worked with kids, a lot, and I remember these students, they were trying to figure out an aim and motto for their graduating class, and they were looking at things, and I just read a rock climbing article. I used to do a lot of rock climbing, and these guys were talking about some of the climbs they were doing were actually an easier grade than they were capable of doing, but their motto was aim low and you'll overachieve.
Ah,
And I've always kind of chuckled about that, but sometimes that's not a bad thing. In other words, aim low, be successful to get your courage up, and then take steps. Sometimes we go too big, and then we literally do go home and quit.
well, yes, and this is a separate kind of conversation, but it's like you want to set your bar high, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you want to be able to have a sense of accomplishment. I've lived that, personally. So I think going forward in my role in the ministry, I'm going to always overpromise, or no, underpromise and overdeliver for you, Marty, as my boss. So I think I'll go with
Well,
that.
yeah,
So
you don't climb Mount Everest on your first try, you know?
no, you don't.
I mean, there's some people probably could, some Olympic athlete, but even them might be
No, you
tough.
got to train. You got to take small steps, and I mean, we know that. So you've got other events. I know you've had. I think most recently, other than the retreat, you had a father-daughter getaway, right?
Yep. Yeah, that was a backpacking trip, and we've done camp outs, canoe trips, all kinds of stuff like that. I tend to specialize in the outdoor area because I find that's really the perfect engagement for dads. Some dads don't have a background in that, but I really admire like the last father-daughter, daddy-daughter backpacking trip we did. It was only a couple of miles. It was really, about as easy as we could make it. But this one father, he was 50 something. He became a father later in life. He had a teenage daughter, and she'd never gone backpacking. He'd never gone backpacking. And they had such a great time. They had wonderful attitude. It was just beautiful. All those dads and daughters, we went up to this waterfall, and they're all swimming around in the swimming hole. It was just, it couldn't be better. I just have seen so much joy. And if I could say something, Mike, really, the litmus test of a successful father son, daddy daughter type event is the look on the faces of those
Yeah.
children. If they're having a good time. I
Yep.
mean, I have some dads and daughters go, yeah, I don't know if I got to poop in the woods. What? you know,
Yeah.
and for some people that's a big stretch, but we most of the time are doing front country with dads and daughters where there's
Front country,
yeah,
not the back.
yeah,
Not like what you're doing tomorrow and this weekend.
yeah, no, yeah, that's going to be another thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, quickly then list out all the events that you do on an annual basis.
Well, I think that again, I've tried to continue to minister at my local church.
Okay.
And so we have an annual men's breakfast. We had 150 or 160 guys at that. It's a big church. And then, so that'd be in January. We always have some kind of an event or at least acknowledgement of dads at Father's Day. And then we have in the fall our men's retreat. So I pretty much just practice what I'm preaching there. There's a lot of men's groups going on as well. And I want to get one branch of our ministry is to have an outreach part of our ministry that is based out of the outpost here. And that's been lagging in my vision of what I'd wanted to do. Because I feel like this, Mike. You can't talk about something with any level of authority if you haven't done it. And so that's part of the ministry. I believe that, we need to connect head, heart, and hands. And so the hands part is engagement, getting guys to do things. I have not done as much of that as I would like to.
So when you say outreach, do you mean like inviting just guys from the community to that location and just to do things?
Basically, to have and you can look in our group's webpage, there's one called Community Outreach or Community Service, and there's a downloadable document that shares with you our vision, what we're doing, but on a very limited basis yet. We need
Okay.
it's kind of a team-based ministry. So my vision there is, and this would be a challenge for any guys, is to have, a number of teams, and they don't have to be just men. You can have men and women, families, that saying we're going to have a rotation. And so on our calendar, we know that we're going to be called up for duty to help people in the community. Maybe some older woman needs her stuff moved from a house. Piano needs to be moved. Maybe gutters need to be cleaned out. Things that are very doable with, it's not high skill level.
Right.
But I think those are the opportunities to interface with your own church members, those in the community that are very authentic. And we need to be doing more of that because I'm telling you, Mike, in the end, it's not going to be about our theology.
Yep.
You know, Jesus is not going to say, okay, I want to give you a quiz here before I let you in.
Yeah.
It's going to be like,
God we serve.
yeah, well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Hey everyone, this is Mike, and you might have noticed that the episode was a little bit abrupt in quitting. We had a couple of technical issues in the background. What we decided to do is we're going to make the one we just did, me and Marty, the interview, a part one, and then we're going to record a part two, hopefully next week, and we'll be able to get that part two out to you as well. So I hope you enjoy this this interview that me and Marty had today, talking about just where things have gone and where they are, and looking at a little bit about where things are going. And we've got some other pieces to that we're going to be talking about in part two. God bless.